You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I hope you were staying up late yesterday, because if you weren't, you missed 3 huge NBA trades. I'll start with the 2 of them that involve the Milwaukee Bucks. They traded Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, 3 unprotected first-rounders, the 24th overall pick, their unprotected first-rounder in 2025, and their unprotected first-rounder in 2027, along with the rights to swap first-rounders in 2024 and 2026. All that's going to the Pelicans in exchange for Jrue Holiday and the 60th overall pick. The 42nd overall pick may be in that trade also. Eric Nem of The Athletic said it was. Andrew Lopez of ESPN said it wasn't. So there are conflicting reports on that. In addition to that, the Bucks are going to acquire Bogdan Bogdanović in a sign-and-trade with the Kings. Bogdanović and Justin James are going to go to the Bucks in exchange for Dante DiVincenzo, DJ Wilson, and Ersan Ilyasova. If you need to rewind this podcast so you can understand everything the Bucks did, I don't blame you. Here's how I'll break down these trades. I'll break them down individually, and then I'll break them down in totality. You'll see what I mean in a minute. This is way too much to give up for Jrue Holiday. I understand that the Bucks needed to improve their roster. They have to keep Giannis happy. There have been rumblings, nothing serious, but rumblings that Giannis is unhappy with the Bucks roster. He wanted some help. Chris Middleton wasn't enough. So now you throw in Jrue Holiday. That's a really good big 3. Okay? I get that. But you just gave up 3 first-rounders and control of 5 first-rounders for a guy who, look, he's really, really good, but he's not great. Jrue Holiday isn't great. In my Nets off-season preview, I said I'd only give up 2 first-rounders for Jrue Holiday. The Bucks gave up 3, maybe 5. I understand the last few seasons that Holiday's had have been really, really good. He's averaged at least 19 points each season, at least 4.5 rebounds each season, and at least 6 assists each season. And he's still a great defender. He's going to make a great Bucks defense that much better. I mean, I'll tell you, if you put Jrue Holiday on Goran Dragic, Dragic isn't having the series that he had against the Bucks. And that series probably unfolds differently. I understand that this is a win-now move. But at some point, you've got to use your noodle and realize that this is way too much. You've got to bring the price down. The only way that this trade makes sense is if Giannis committed to re-signing with the Bucks. If Giannis said to the Bucks, you either pull this trade off or I'm testing free agency. Okay, fine. Do this trade. I don't mind that. But if he didn't, you just put Jrue Holiday in the same class as Paul George. If you'll recall, the Clippers gave up control of 7 first-rounders to get Paul George. I don't put Jrue Holiday in that class. I just don't. I like Jrue Holiday. I really do. But this is just way too much to give up for him. I don't mind trading Eric Bledsoe for him. I don't mind trading George Hill for him. You've got to open up a spot for Holiday somehow. Bledsoe and Hill will be fine Pelicans. Hill's going to be a solid backup for Lonzo. He'll produce differently than Lonzo. Lonzo's really good defensively, and he's a great distributor. George Hill is a lights-out three-point shooter. And Eric Bledsoe should be a really good starting shooting guard. You pair those guys with Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Jackson Hayes or Derek Favors, you've got something there. This is a great trade for the Pelicans. They win this trade. I can't endorse giving up control of 5 first-rounders for Jrue Holiday. That just doesn't work for me. Use your noodle. That doesn't work for me. On to the Bogdanovich trade. This is fantastic for the Bucks. I like watching Bogdan Bogdanovich play a lot. In fact, I like watching Bojan Bogdanovich play too. I liked him on the Nets. But this Bogdan Bogdanovich, has turned into a really, really good shooter. Every year he gets better. His points per game have gone up. He's getting much better defensively. I mean, think about this starting lineup for a minute. Jrue Holiday, Bogdan Bogdanovich, Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez. That is a fantastic starting lineup. Dante DiVincenzo is going to be lucky to ever turn into Bogdanovich. I like DiVincenzo. His shooting got a lot better last year. He took a big step forward. I know why the Kings wanted him. The Kings replaced Bogdanovich with Bogdanovich Light. That makes sense for him. Meanwhile, the Bucks replaced Bogdanovich Light with the actual Bogdanovich. That makes perfect sense for them. DJ Wilson has struggled to carve out a consistent role for himself in the NBA. It's fair to wonder if he'll ever put it all together. For his sake, I hope he does, but I'm not overly confident that he will. Ersan Ilyasova is a fine veteran to have. The Kings have a ton of young guns. You've got to get some veteran presence in there somehow. I like Ilyasova. I wanted him on the Nets a few years ago. No complaints with the Kings trading for him, although I don't know how much playing time he's really going to get. The Kings may look to play their young guns over him. And Justin James really didn't contribute much his rookie year. I'm not going to give up on him. I think he'll get a chance to strut his stuff with the Bucks. Let's see if he can contribute. But I'll say this. The Bucks instantly got better in this trade. Again, they traded Bogdanovich Light for the actual Bogdanovich. They gave up a nobody in DJ Wilson and an expendable piece in Ersan Ilyasova. He's just expendable. You can find guys like him in free agency very easily. The Bucks easily win this trade. But now we have to look at these two trades in totality. The Bucks aren't stupid. They know that they need to win with Giannis now. They may not get a chance to in 2 years. God only knows if he's going to stay or not. Giannis has said he's going to stay, but until he puts pen to paper, people are going to speculate on his future. The Bucks know that too. They need to convince him that they're serious about winning. They tried last year by surrounding him with a bunch of solid shooters. Nothing spectacular. Just solid shooters. Guys like Bledsoe and Wesley Matthews, DiVincenzo, Hill, Pat Connaughton, Ilyasova. It got the Bucks the best record in the NBA, but they folded like a cheap suit against the Heat. They've got to win now. You have to at least make the NBA Finals with Giannis. They made the Eastern Conference Finals a couple years ago. Good for them. They lost to a great Raptors team. There's no shame in that. But they took a major step back this year. They were destroyed in 5 games by the Heat. And against the Magic, they weren't overly impressive. Moreover, they're reading the reports that James Harden is trying like hell to get himself to the Nets. The guy just turned down a $50 million per year extension to try to get himself to the Nets. The Bucks cannot compete with that. If they roll the same roster out this coming year as they rolled out last year, Bledsoe, Matthews, Middleton, Giannis, and Lopez, the Nets would destroy the Bucks. The Bucks know that. All those things were probably running through their heads. We've got to keep Giannis happy. We've got to prove that we're serious about putting a great roster around him. A roster that can win right now. Damn the torpedoes, go full speed ahead. It's similar to what I want the Nets to do in a James Harden trade. Hopefully this convinces him to stay. And even if the Nets can pull off the Harden trade, we can put a starting five out there that rivals the Nets. I'm not saying it's as good as the Nets, but it's closer than you think. Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan versus Jrue Holiday, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez. Who are you taking? I can make a case for the Nets, and I can make a case for the Bucks. I give the Bucks credit for doing this. It's the right thing to go all in. But the key to it is Giannis. If Giannis doesn't re-sign with the Bucks, all of this is for naught. If they win a title next year, okay, fine. But I don't think that's going to happen. I do think the Nets are going to win the NBA title next year. I really do. Regardless of if they trade for James Harden or not. I mean, I'll tell you, if you're the Washington Wizards, bear in mind, Bradley Beal can still be traded. You've got to think to yourself, you know what? Bradley Beal is better than Jrue Holiday. Can we get control of 6 first-rounders? That's the thing. The real losers are the Nets. I mean, if Jrue Holiday can get 5 first-rounders, what can Harden get? 8? 9? 10? What's the limit? You better win. If you pull off that Harden trade or that Beal trade and you give up all that, you better win. Since the Bucks gave all this up, they better win. And Giannis better re-sign. If Giannis walks and the Bucks don't win the NBA title next year, the Bogdanovic trade still makes a ton of sense. I have no issue with that at all. Period. For the Bucks, it makes perfect sense, and for the Kings, it makes perfect sense. I'll say that again. But if the Bucks lose their last game of the season this year, and Giannis leaves, the Holiday trade makes no sense. Having said that, though, if the Bucks lose this year and Giannis resigns, the Holiday trade makes perfect sense. It's all about Giannis. They have to keep him happy. And for the Bucks' sakes, I hope these 2 trades made him happy. Speaking of the Rockets, they did make a trade, but it's not the blockbuster that everyone wanted them to make. It's a notable trade, but it's not at the Harden or Westbrook level. They traded Robert Covington to the Trailblazers for Trevor Ariza, the 16th overall pick, and the Trailblazers protected 2021 first rounder. This signals to me that the Rockets are going to blow things up. Whether they blow it up all the way by trading Harden, that remains to be seen. But I'll tell you, I think it's a fair bet to say that Russell Westbrook is going to be traded now. I think it's a fair bet to say that Eric Gordon is going to be traded now. Harden, if I had to put money on it, I think he's going to be traded, but I'm not as confident in saying that as I am in saying that guys like Westbrook and Gordon are going to be traded. The Rockets replaced Robert Covington, your typical 3-and-D guy, with a lesser 3-and-D guy. Here's hoping they don't play Ariza at center. That was doomed to fail. I mean, I'll say this, regardless of whether Harden's traded or not, the Rockets roster next year is gonna look light years different than the last Rockets roster you saw. The 16th overall pick and the future first are fine building blocks. Like I said, they're gonna blow this thing up. They tried to win now. It didn't work. Daryl Morey did a terrible job in thinking that crazy small ball lineup would work. You had to know that the Lakers would kill you if you got matched up against them. There was no doubt in my mind that the Lakers would win that series. And it wasn't even close. The Rockets lost in 5 games. 3 of their losses were by double digits. They got out-rebounded in that series 227 to 163. They had 15 blocks. You know how many the Lakers had? 31. More than double. It was absolutely doomed to fail. But I'll say this, in terms of starting the rebuild, the Rockets did a good job here. As for the Trailblazers, I kinda like the idea of Covington playing with the Trailblazers. Think about this starting lineup for a minute. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Robert Covington, Carmelo Anthony, assuming you bring him back, and Yusuf Nurkic. That's a really good starting 5. I mean, you want to talk about a team that needs to win now. The Trailblazers have one of, if not the best backcourt in the NBA right now. What do they have to show for it? They've never won a game in the Western Conference Finals with Lillard and McCollum on the roster. Yes, they made the Western Conference Finals a couple years ago, but they were eviscerated by the Warriors. They got swept. Granted, you had a couple close losses in there, but a sweep is a sweep. It's up for debate which backcourt is the best in the NBA. Is it the Warriors? Is it the Rockets? Is it the Blazers? But the Blazers are in the conversation. You've got to win with those guys now. I'm not saying they will, but this trade will make them a lot better. The Blazers massively underwhelmed last year. They finished with an under 500 record. They snuck into the playoffs as the 8th seed. They had to win a play-in game against the Grizzlies to get there. And then they got creamed by the Lakers in 5 games. They followed up a Western Conference Finals appearance by needing to win a play-in game to even make the playoffs. And then losing in the first round in 5 games to cap off an under 500 season. The Blazers' defense was dreadful last year. They allowed the 5th most points per game in the NBA last year with just over 116. Covington will go a long way towards shoring that up. Great job by the Blazers. The 2 firsts may be a little excessive, but I don't mind it. I know why they did it. I'll give the Blazers a 55-45 edge here. Alright, now I'll give you some Valk talk about the NFL game that happened yesterday. The Vikings beating the Bears 19-13. And you want to talk about 2 teams that are headed in different directions? It's the Vikings and Bears. The Vikings started out the season 1-5. Cousins was getting criticized by everyone. Now they've won their last 3 games. Granted, 2 of them were because Dalvin Cook was absolutely incredible, but yesterday wasn't. Yesterday was all Cousins. Cook was solid, 30 carries for 96 yards, but he didn't have a touchdown. And that's not a Dalvin Cook-like game. You want Cook to average more than 3.2 yards per carry. I like that he almost rushed for 100 yards, but Cook has to be better. Meanwhile, you take a look at Cousins. He completed 25 of his 36 passes, threw for just under 300 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. He got all his big guns involved. Justin Jefferson looks like he's going to be a great player for a long time. The Vikings traded Stephon Diggs and replaced him with Justin Jefferson. I understand that Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but in short order, we could be saying that about Jefferson. He looks really special. Adam Thielen had 2 touchdowns. Kyle Rudolph bounced back from his lost fumble to have 4 catches for 63 yards. The victory yesterday for the Vikings was all Cousins. Now they're 4-5. They're not going to catch the Packers to win the division, but that final wild card spot isn't out of the question. They're only 2 games back. I'm not saying the Vikings are going to make the playoffs. In fact, I don't think they're going to, but give them credit. They bounced back from a terrible start, and they're in the hunt right now. Meanwhile, when you look at the Bears, they are in total freefall. They started this season 5-1. Trubisky had a good start to this season. Foles comes in, and he looked good early on, but this is what Foles does. He just can't sustain it for an extended period of time. I mean, the Bears yesterday in the second half looked like the Jets. They were putrid. They couldn't do anything. Here's how their drives went in the second half. Forget the Cordero Patterson touchdown. Okay, that doesn't count as a drive by the offense. That's a great job on special teams. Patterson is one of the best special teamers in NFL history, and the Vikings special teams is completely useless. Their special teams coordinator is going to be gone after this season. But here's how the Bears' offense went. 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Then they changed it up. They actually got a first down late, and then they went 3 and out. Finally, the last drive of the game, Foles gets hurt. Tyler Bray actually makes a first down. Then, after spiking the ball to stop the clock, he throws 3 straight incompletions. That injury on Foles, that did not look good. I don't know when he's going to be ready to play again. The Bears are on bye this week, so that bodes well for him. But even then, Mitchell Trubisky should be ready. The Bears are in free fall right now. It's gotten so bad that Matt Nagy has given up play calling. Bill Lazor was calling the plays yesterday. I've praised Nagy on this show before. I can't do it anymore. There are a lot of Bears fans that are calling for his head. And when you start a season 5-1 and then lose your next 4, yeah, it's warranted. The Bears are in trouble right now. They have this fantastic defense. Playmakers up and down. Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, etc., etc. Meanwhile, their offense is probably the second worst in the NFL right now. The only team that's worse than them is the Jets. I understand that David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen were out. Cohen's out for the year, and Montgomery is fighting a concussion. But there's no excuse for what that Bears offense did the second half. Where was Jimmy Graham? He didn't get a catch. Graham has had a really good season for the Bears. He was invisible. The Bears' offense yesterday was just get the ball to Allen Robinson. Look, Allen Robinson is a great wide receiver. He's a free agent at the end of this season. I want him on the Jets. I know he has some injury concerns, but I want to give Trevor Lawrence as many weapons as I can. Allen Robinson would be a fantastic weapon for him. But you know what? He can't do it all himself. Anthony Miller only had 2 catches on 7 targets. Foles looked dreadful. He barely got over 100 passing yards. Bill Lazor did a terrible job in play calling. Again, the second half and the Jimmy Graham disappearing act. That doesn't work for me. The Bears are in trouble right now. The only thing they can do now to try to salvage this season, they're 500. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they can go on a crazy run, is to fire Nagy. Like I said, you have a resurgent Vikings team and a free-falling Bears team. Alright, now I'll give you some baseball Valk talk. And it is here. The Baseball Hall of Fame has released the official ballot for 2021. I understand that we can find out whenever we want who could be on the ballot. Thank you, Baseball Reference, but hey, this gives me an excuse to go Baseball Hall of Faming. There are very few things on this earth that I like doing more than to go Baseball Hall of Faming. I don't go to the Hall of Fame enough. I've thought about getting a timeshare in Cooperstown. I really have. Or at least near Cooperstown. If you're a baseball fan, you have to go at least once. It's just that simple. They do a great job with it. What I want to do is tell you who I'd vote for if I had a vote. Now, they're all retreads. So if you go back far enough in the history of this show, you can find it, but since the ballot was officially released, I'll do it again. I've got to go with Curt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Omar Vizquel, Gary Sheffield, Manny Ramirez, Sammy Sosa, and Andy Pettitte. Before you say anything, yes, I'm putting the steroid guys in. Okay, I have no problem with it. We have players who bent the rules in the Hall of Fame. Gaylord Perry threw a spitball. Whitey Ford would rough up the baseball. He did that at the end of his career. I understand that those crimes are less serious than steroids. But at the end of the day, steroids saved baseball. Here's what you have to realize. After the strike in '94, baseball was dead. No one cared about baseball. The sport needed something to give it a jolt. And that's when 1998 rolled around. McGwire and Sosa chasing Roger Maris's record. No one cared about steroids. When Bonds broke Sosa's and McGwire's marks in 2001, no one cared about steroids. I mean, I'll tell you the one thing that drives me nuts. The people who vote for Bonds and Clemens, but no one else. They're okay with putting those guys in. But Sosa, no. Sheffield, no. Manny, no. I don't get that. Either put them all in or leave them all out. And one other thing, you have no idea how much the steroids really helped them. There's no question that it did, but how much? Can you really find me 300 home runs that Barry Bonds hit solely because of steroids? What about 2,000 strikeouts that Roger Clemens got solely because of steroids? How about 200 home runs that Sammy Sosa got solely because of steroids? You can't. You don't know how much it helped them. At the end of the day, the burden of proof is on you to prove how much it really helped them. There's no question that it did, but how much? That has never been really explored. I mean, you take a look at a guy like Manny Ramirez. Pull up Manny Ramirez's stats right now and tell me how much steroids really helped him. You can't say that he took steroids his whole career. That's ridiculous. You have no proof of that. Again, the burden of proof is on you. You're innocent until proven guilty in this country. Here's a guy who was suspended for steroids twice, in 2009 and 2011, after he had hit his 500th home run. That's the only proof you have of him taking steroids. Maybe it was just to elongate his career. I'm not saying that's right. But you're telling me just because he wanted to elongate his career artificially means that we wipe out the 500 previous home runs? No, that's ridiculous. You have no idea how much the steroids really help these guys. Yes, I'm putting them all in. So now I'll make the case for the 8 guys who I want in, and I'll rapid fire through these guys. Curt Schilling has over 3,000 strikeouts. He won 3 World Series. He has a World Series MVP. He has some iconic moments. I don't care that you disagree with his political views. Then you know what? Don't vote for him for public office. You're not supposed to evaluate him based on his personal life. You're supposed to evaluate him based on what he did on the diamond. And this guy was one of the best pitchers in baseball. He has 3,116 strikeouts. There's no good reason to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. Just like there's no good reason to keep Roger Clemens out of the Hall of Fame. The best pitcher of his era. He won an MVP, 7-time Cy Young winner. Won 2 World Series with the Yankees, 11-time All-Star. Absolutely loved watching him pitch with the Yankees. I was there when Clemens announced he was coming back in 2007. I was the last person on earth to find out that Susan Waldman went bananas over it. And I still have no problem with that, by the way. I think that was way overblown. You don't need me to tell you that Clemens' career is worthy of a Hall of Fame induction if you can write off the steroids, which I can. And Barry Bonds, same thing. I'm not going to make the case for Barry Bonds. The guy has 762 home runs. Do I need to say any more than that? No, I don't. Omar Vizquel is interesting. I understand that he played in an era where he was overshadowed by better players. Guys like A-Rod and Nomar and Jeter deprived Vizquel of the headlines that he deserved and the individual accomplishments that he deserved. This guy was a 3-time All-Star. That's it. But if you look at his career, you can find other All-Star caliber seasons. He was also a better fielder than all of those guys. Vizquel has 11 Gold Gloves. You combine that with his 2,877 hits, he's a Hall of Famer to me. I understand some people will make the argument that he was a compiler, but here's my argument against the compiler argument. When did you want him to retire? After his age 40 season? He actually had a couple good seasons after that. He really should have retired after 2011. But by then he had already gotten over 2,800 hits. He already had 11 Gold Gloves. The people saying that he hung around too long, yes, you're right, but that doesn't negate what he did previously. Omar Vizquel is a Hall of Famer. Gary Sheffield has over 500 home runs. Without the steroids, there's no good reason to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. Same thing with Manny Ramirez. Same thing with Sammy Sosa. Andy Pettitte. Forget the steroid allegations. Forget his issue with Clemens. With Brian McNamee. Here's a guy with 256 wins and 2,448 strikeouts. I understand that those aren't Hall of Fame numbers. He only made an All-Star team 3 times. That's not a Hall of Famer either. But he has 5 World Series rings. He holds numerous postseason records. He has the most wins, starts, and innings pitched in postseason history. He's not an upper-tier Hall of Famer. Him and Vizquel aren't upper-tier Hall of Famers. But postseason stats matter. As someone who saw Andy Pettitte pitch a lot in the playoffs, and I mean a lot, there were very few pitchers in his era that you wanted on the mound more than him. I didn't like some of the stuff he did with the Yankees. I didn't like him leaving to go to Houston. I understand wanting to be closer to the family. I get that. That's a valid reason. I just didn't like that he left. John Lieber and Javier Vasquez were terrible replacements for him and Clemens. If Pettitte stays, that never happens. The Yankees probably win one more game in the 04 ALCS. And then God only knows what they do against the Cardinals. I also don't like how he jerked around the Yankees at the end of his career. Is he going to retire or is he going to come back? Is he going to retire or is he going to come back? I don't like that. And I understand that the regular season numbers aren't jaw-dropping, but postseason stats count for something. This guy has 5 World Series rings. Numerous postseason records. Yes, he's a Hall of Famer. I do just want to go through a few other guys that are on the ballot that will get some attention, but I don't think are Hall of Famers. I don't understand the Scott Rowland argument. It just doesn't hold water to me. This guy was never the best third baseman in baseball. Chipper Jones and Adrian Beltre were a million times better than him. When you watched him play, there's no way you thought you were seeing a Hall of Famer. Also, Aramis Ramirez is on this ballot for the first time. Was Scott Rowland that much better than Aramis Ramirez? Rowland was a better fielder. But Ramirez was probably the better offensive player. Ramirez definitely isn't a Hall of Famer. Neither is Rowland. He's a Hall of Very Good type. The guy only has 2,000 hits, 316 homers. No, that's not a Hall of Famer. And neither is Ramirez. Billy Wagner has gotten some love for the Hall of Fame. Tell me one year when Billy Wagner was the best closer in baseball. Tell me one year when he was the second best closer in baseball. You can't. There's no way this guy's a Hall of Famer. 422 saves? That means nothing. If you put Wagner in the Hall of Fame, you've got to put Francisco Rodriguez and John Franco in the Hall of Fame. They both have more saves than Wagner. And you know what? Neither one of those guys should be in the Hall of Fame. You know what? Let's open it up to all former Mets closers. Let's put Armando Benitez in the Hall of Fame. Let's put Tug McGraw in the Hall of Fame. Let's reserve a spot for Edwin Diaz. No, there's no way that Billy Wagner's a Hall of Famer. Todd Helton, when you first look at his stats, he has over 2,500 hits, a career .316 average, .414 on base percentage. Some people give him Hall of Fame love. Here's why I don't. He benefited too much from playing half of his career at Coors Field. At home, he hit .345 with a .441 on-base percentage to go with 227 home runs and 859 RBIs. On the road, he hit .287 with a .386 on-base percentage, 142 home runs, and 547 RBIs. He only played in 35 less road games than home games. Those 35 less games aren't enough to account for the drop-off. The home-road splits are too slanted. No, he's not a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that no Rocky should be in the Hall of Fame. If Nolan Arenado stays with the Rockies for his whole career, we're probably going to end up seeing him in the Hall of Fame. It wouldn't surprise me if he got 500 home runs or 3,000 hits. But I can't do it for Helton. Just like I didn't want Walker to be in. I can't do it for Helton. And Jeff Kent just doesn't have the total body of work that I'd want him to have. See, the thing is, the first half of his career, he really wasn't that great. He was solid, but he wasn't great. When he went to the Giants, and he was playing with Bonds, even though they hated each other, it was still the best thing that could have happened to Kent. I like that Kent has an MVP, but that's really all he has going for him. He wasn't a great fielder. He wasn't as bad as some people make him out to be, but he wasn't great. Alright, he wasn't Roberto Alomar out there. He only has 2,461 hits to go with 377 home runs. He's Hall of Very Good. He's like the definition of Hall of Very Good. But as for the Hall of Fame, I can't do it. One final thing on the Hall of Fame. It's been kind of fun to speculate on who out of the first-timers has the best case for being in the Hall of Fame. Now, none of these guys should be in the Hall of Fame. Tim Hudson, no. Mark Burley, no. A.J. Burnett, no. Nick Swisher, definitely not. But I'll tell you, and my father made a great case for this guy to me. You can make a strong argument for Torrey Hunter to be in the Hall of Fame. Here's a guy with 2,452 hits, 353 home runs. The stats don't blow you away, but there are players with lesser stats that are in the Hall of Fame. But here's the kicker. And if you love defense, you'd have a tough time leaving Hunter out. This guy has 9 Gold Gloves. We have a lot of players in the Hall of Fame because of defense. I mean, here's the list of outfielders that have more Gold Gloves than Torrey Hunter. Roberto Clemente, Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr., Andrew Jones, Al Kaline, and Ichiro. Andrew Jones isn't getting into the Hall of Fame. He's gotten some support, but he strikes me as the kind of guy who's going to linger around for 10 years and then fall off the ballot. He's not a Hall of Famer. Ichiro's definitely a Hall of Famer, he's just not eligible yet. Look, if you want to put Jones in the Hall of Fame, you have to put Hunter in the Hall of Fame. Also, like Jones, Hunter killed the Yankees in the playoffs. He never beat the Yankees in the playoffs, but he hit them really well. Torrey Hunter has the best Hall of Fame case out of all the first-time eligibles. But he's not a Hall of Famer. Andrew Jones isn't a Hall of Famer. Bobby Abreu isn't a Hall of Famer. None of those guys are Hall of Famers. Hunter has a better case than you'd think, but he still wouldn't get my vote. Having said that, though, it wouldn't surprise me if he got over the 5% threshold. He may be the only one. Moving on now to the Braves signing Drew Smyly to a 1-year deal worth $11 million. And holy moly, is this an overpay. I understand that Smyly had a good year last year. It seems like he's put his injury issues behind him. This is a guy who, when he came up with the Tigers and looked like he was going to be a really good pitcher for a long time, then he got traded to the Rays, got bit by the injury bug, and he was never able to shake it. With the Giants, he pitched well, went 0-1 with a 3.42 ERA. I hate the win-loss record, but the ERA is fine. The 42 strikeouts is fine. But to give him $11 million, that's ridiculous. In 2019, he went 4-7 with a 6.24 ERA. To give a fifth starter $11 million, who in the last full season of baseball had an over 6 ERA and a losing record, is ridiculous. This is a crazy overpay. Moving on now to the Padres locking up Mike Clevinger for 2 years at $11.5 million. And the cherry on top of this deal is that Clevinger is gonna undergo Tommy John surgery. So obviously he'll miss the 2021 season. Hopefully he'll be back in time for the start of the 2022 season. But with Tommy John surgery, you never know. The way this contract is structured is Clevinger is getting $2 million to not play, to rehab from surgery, and then he's getting $6.5 million in 2022. The extra $3 million comes in the form of a signing bonus. This is a good move for the Padres. You're doing right by Clevinger. You're not giving up on him after you find out he needs surgery. You gave up an arm and a leg to get him. And we all know the talent that Clevinger is. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. Yeah, he acted like an idiot with the Indians this year, but you can look past that very easily if you're the Padres. They're a team that's been deprived of playoff success for a long time. They just broke their streak of not making the playoffs since 2006. God only knows how Clevinger is going to be in 2022. Will he be the Clevinger of old? Probably not, but I think he'll still be really good. This is a good move for the Padres. It really is. Moving on now to Theo Epstein, stepping down as the Cubs' president of baseball operations. His last day will be Friday. Jed Hoyer, the Cubs GM, will now be the Cubs' president of baseball operations. There is no question that Theo Epstein is one of the brightest minds in all of baseball. The way that he has integrated analytics with a big payroll is something that every major league team should try to emulate. He knows when to use analytics, and he knows when to damn the torpedoes and go full speed ahead. This guy is a future Hall of Famer. He won 2 World Series with 2 cursed franchises. He broke the curse of the Bambino, and he broke the curse of the Billy Goat. God only knows what's going to happen with Epstein now. There have been some rumblings that he could go to the Mets or the Phillies. But I think he's going to take a year off. At least a year, maybe more. He's been doing this for a long time. That could take a toll on you. And Epstein doesn't have anything else to accomplish. He's a future Hall of Famer. It's very rare that you find a guy like Brian Cashman who can go nonstop. As for how the Cubs will do without him, I think that Jason McLeod would be promoted to GM. He was interviewed by the Angels for their GM position, so the Cubs may want to lock him up. Hoyer didn't do a great job when he was in charge of the Padres, but he's had time to learn under one of the best baseball minds of all time. I have the utmost respect for Theo Epstein. Even when he was with the Red Sox, I had the utmost respect for him. Will the Cubs suffer without having Epstein? Yes. But I think that Hoyer and possibly McLeod will do a solid job. Yeah, the Cubs haven't been great recently, but that can change very easily. I do want to talk about the death of Lindy McDaniel, who died on Saturday at the age of 84 from the coronavirus. Lindy McDaniel was probably the third true closer in baseball history. Off the top of my head, I'd have to say it goes Joe Page, Hoyt Wilhelm, and then Lindy McDaniel. He really paved the way for guys like Ron Peronoski and Luis Arroyo, Jim Constanti, Mo Drabowski, Phil Regan, etc., etc. His career changed forever in 1959. He was a bonus baby. Came up with the Cardinals in 1955. And he was okay, but he was never what the Cardinals really wanted him to be. Then Solly Hemus took over as Cardinals manager and made McDaniel his closer. That year, McDaniel led the majors in saves with 16. Forget the number. He led the majors in saves. That's impressive. The year after that, he led the National League in winning percentage. He went 12-4 with 27 saves, which once again led the majors. And he made the 2 All-Star games that year. The year after that, McDaniel had a little bit of a regression. He went 10-6, but he only had 9 saves to go along with a 4.87 ERA. He got back in the swing of things in 62. He had 14 saves. But then he was traded to the Cubs. With the Cubs, he really hit his stride again. He went 13-7 with a 2.86 ERA. He led the National League in saves with 22. and he followed that up by getting 16 saves. After that, McDaniel kind of settled in as a really good reliever, but he wasn't a closer again until he was traded to the Yankees in 1968. On those terrible Yankee teams, he was one of the few bright spots. In 1970, he had 29 saves. To do that on one of those early 70s Yankees teams, that's impressive. Forget the regular season record. Alright, those were bad teams. If you don't make the playoffs, you're a bad Yankees team. Period. Case closed. His last great act in baseball was being traded to the Royals in exchange for Ken Wright, who didn't do anything in the majors, and Lou Piniella, who did a lot in the majors. Won 2 World Series with the Yankees and would hold numerous roles for them throughout his career. McDaniel was the last Yankee pitcher to hit a home run before the designated hitter became a thing. Thank you, Wikipedia. He also hit the last home run in Tiger Stadium by a pitcher. Again, thank you, Wikipedia. It's such a shame that he never made the playoffs. This guy pitched 21 years in the majors, and his teams never made the playoffs. Such an injustice for such a great man. He was a really nice guy. May he rest in peace. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying, even Napoleon had his Watergate.